Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. Hello, Maverick family. Man, we have unlimited news ready to go here tonight. I could probably talk for the next 24 hours until the next news cycle begins. There is so much going on. It is has been difficult to know where to start. But of course, we have tonight on the Canadian front, Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, calls for an investigation into the Premier for possible treason. The demand coming from First Nations chiefs. Also, Laura Loomer sort of doing a 180 on the whole Ukraine war thing. That's a big surprise. We'll explain more about that. Kash Patel, FBI director, under fire from within. It seems he has enemies within the FBI, or at least, professional adversaries, making disclosures about his behavior, his social media comments with regard to that planned terror attack against President Trump's UFC250 freedom event at the White House. Kash Patel being accused of possibly jeopardizing the investigation. I'll explain that. What else do we have for you? Also, what's going on with the Iran deal? What's going on with the Canada-U.S. trade negotiations or preparations for such negotiations? We have, what else? Ukraine gaining ground and new support as the G7 wraps up, and Trump boards Air Force One to head back. Well, I guess he was actually off to Versailles for a very fancy dinner. Oh, the burden of being rich and powerful. Where are you going? Oh, I'm flying off to Versailles for dinner with Macron. My good friend Emmanuel. Maybe I'll show you the thing with Kim Kardashian if we have time. When she was trying to fit into some weird latex bodysuit thing. I just thought about that. Anyway, we've got all of that. Should we mention the algae and the reflecting pool? I don't know. We're a little late coming to the table with that one, so we'll see. But I may also live up to my promise or my tease last night, saying that I might comment further on the rape gang inquiry report out of the UK. I did read more of the report. I do have more thoughts on it. If we have time and you want me to comment, you let me know in the chat, and I'll give you a take on it that you're probably not hearing anyplace else. Stay with me. We'll be right back. And we'll start digging in to the, the feast of news that we have before us tonight. Stay with me.
We are the Mavericks. Welcome to the Matrix, baby. Hope you like the view. We are the Mavericks. The world is watching. We are the Mavericks.
Okay, let's start with Trump and his. I hate to do this. I kind of hate to lead the newscast off with a Trump clip because he just dominates the news every day. He just sucks the oxygen out of the whole world of news, doesn't he? He just walks into a room, dominates. Because I think, it's because he's so extreme on every level. But tonight, he's about to board Air Force One. And as he's about to depart on Air Force One from the G7 conference, he says that he'd kind of prefer if the trade deal with Canada, CUSMA, was just canceled. This after yesterday, Carney caught on a hot mic talking with Trump about Canada's plan to import 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles. Trump, he says, Carney said, I thought you'd like that. Trump nods and says, I like it. But now today, which is part of the whole CUSMA renegotiation. And now tonight, as he's about to board his flight to go for dinner with Emmanuel, he says, I'd really prefer if the whole thing were canceled. I've got the clip. Here we go.
To me, I think it's better without it, Europe has, or Canada.
How long do you hope USMCA negotiations or review go on?
Well, it's not something that's, to me, I think it's better without it. I mean, to be honest with you. I'm not a big fan of it. I liked it because it got us out of NAFTA. In other words, after 6 years, you had to close it, got us out of NAFTA. That's the thing I liked about it most. We do better without an agreement.
Do you want to just leave it enrolling?
I would rather leave it unsigned. I'd rather have it terminated.
You'd rather have it terminated? Oh, those are different things, sir. I just want to be clear.
I would rather not have the agreement, but I may sign it.
Right.
But we do better as a country if we don't have an agreement.
So are you thinking of...
Yeah, I'm thinking about maybe we won't be able to make a deal. I would rather not have the USMCA. The primary reason I wanted it was because there was no way out of NAFTA, which was the worst trade agreement ever made, like ever. And they had no termination. And it was very hard to get USMCA for that reason. And I had a 6-year clause. Who would have thought I would have been here in the 6 years? They got it 6 years because they hoped I wouldn't be here. My term was supposed to be over with. So on top of everything else it comes to, I would prefer not having an agreement, but I'm open to doing it. We'll see what happens.
So as of now, it's just going to stick around for 10 years. You're okay
We're
with
not.
That?
No, it's not sticking around. It'll be terminated. In other words,
after a decade.
It expires.
Yeah, in a decade.
It expires.
Okay.
I prefer that.
In the first paragraph,
I view it as possibly expiring immediately.
in the first
Man. Yeah, it doesn't matter what you agree to. It doesn't matter what you put your signature to. It's just whatever he wants at any given moment in time. That's not stability. That's not good, especially for Canada, and I think also for the United States, because he is undermining trust. That's invaluable. Trust is invaluable. The most valuable thing you have when you're talking about business. My God. He is a tough negotiator just because he says such bombastic things. Wow. So July 1st, deal is set to either be replaced or renewed for another 10 years. And we're just days away from that. Stay tuned on that one. Man alive. Canada's ambassador to the U.S. just, 2 days ago? Yeah, yesterday? Or the day before? Saying that, things are actually looking good. So, mixed messages for sure coming on that front. But I think it's just part of the process when you're dealing with President Trump. So, don't panic, Canada. I think we're going to be okay. We hold more cards than Trump lets on. I think the F-35 deal is basically sunk, though. I mean, insofar as we have the F-35s that we have, but I think Canada is going to go with the Gripen fighter jet instead, largely because of what Trump has done. Also, you're seeing Canada now, just this week, announced, I think it was yesterday, a big contract for European Union defense coming to Canada. First contract under that, announced by a Montreal firm, and more to come, also by the beginning of the month, as I understand it. So expect to hear more on that front as well. And that is also, I think, happening in part because of what Trump is, his style, where he is undermining trust and rattling confidence between the U.S. and its friends, its allies. He's not the world's greatest negotiator. It may seem like he's being tough and getting a better deal, but in reality, the world is pivoting away from the United States because of what Donald Trump is doing. Is showing. So yeah, and Canada actually is going to reap the benefits of that. So I'm not happy about it, but that's, I think, the actual reality of it. Although, by the time it all shakes down, as I say, I think it's going to all kind of come out in the wash. Canada will be fine. The U.S. will be back to being best of friends. You'll see. I hope. Beats the alternative. But all that going on while, talking about best of friends, Canada, U.S. adversarial relationship, 51st state stuff, it all ties into the separatist issue out in Alberta. Tonight, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith under fire as the Assembly of Treaty Chiefs dropping a huge bomb on Danielle Smith. Treaty 6, 7, and 8 unanimously calling tonight for a general investigation by the RCMP and, a full-scale investigation, rather, by the RCMP and the Auditor General into possible treason being committed by Premier Danielle Smith and her United Conservative Party government. This being called for as the Chiefs cite Section 46 of the Criminal Code of Canada. They met on Treaty 7 territory in Calgary yesterday, voted as one. They pushed a separation referendum. Or rather, I should say, how am I supposed to phrase that? They pushed for an investigation into possible foreign interference and possible treason because the premier has been pushing forward the separatist agenda, opening the door for a referendum, putting Canada's sovereignty at risk. The Chiefs say this tramples on the treaty relationship between their nations within a nation and the federal government, and their relationship also with the provincial government in Alberta. They say it ignores privacy violations affecting millions of people and opens the door to, as I say, foreign interference. So that's the case they're making. I have the statement that they released here tonight. And we have reaction tonight as well from Danielle Smith, moving this story forward. Here's what the Chiefs put out, dated today. The Assembly of Treaty Chiefs of Treaty number 6, number 7, and number 8. They say here has unanimously passed a resolution calling for an investigation by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and Auditor General into the actions of Premier Danielle Smith and the members of the UCP to determine whether they constitute treason under Section 46 of the Criminal Code of Canada. The vote took place in a duly convened meeting on Treaty number 7 territory in Calgary, June 16th, 2026. We call for this investigation on the basis of the intentional violation of the treaties, of calling a referendum in the face of severe risks to Canada's sovereignty and the treaty relationship, and of failing to take action on the violation of privacy rights of millions of people. Further, Premier Smith and the UCP government, they say here, have done all this with significant risks of foreign interference and influence. At the time of treaty, the Northwest Mounted Police now the RCMP, committed to ensuring the safety of First Nations and our territories, and that the Crown guarantees the peace and goodwill mutually promised between First Nations and the Crown in exchange for sharing these lands. United, the chiefs of Treaty Number 6, Treaty Number 7, and Treaty Number 8, territories now call for the fulfillment of this commitment in the form of a full investigation. I think this has merit. Could have some teeth. Danielle Smith's not happy about it. She says that if the chiefs keep talking like this, it will sour their relationship with her. No doubt. Let's bring up Danielle Smith. We have the video of her reaction today.
Premier, treaty chiefs are calling for an investigation into whether your actions over the independence referendum amount to treason under the criminal code. What's your response to that?
Well, I think it's disgraceful. I think it's disgraceful that any government that wants to be taken seriously would level charges that serious against another government. Look, I've had my differences with the federal government, but I have never used language like that. I would ask the treaty chiefs to check themselves, because we have a very collaborative relationship between our government and our ministers. I want that to continue. But this kind of overwrought language has no place in a democracy. When they were pursuing a new relationship with Ottawa, I cheered them along. We are pursuing a new relationship with Ottawa that respects our jurisdiction, and I would ask that they be respectful of that. But they need to, that language has no place in this democratic discussion.
Premier...
David Eby, Premier of BC, he used that word too, treason, more than once. I don't think it's far off the mark, depending on who you're looking at. I'm not sure that I would point my finger directly at her, but some of the people over there, I think that it comes close. And I think that if you want to live in a democracy and you have a complaint on a legal issue, especially from a nation within a nation, First Nations, they take it to the RCMP, they take it to the Auditor General, they want an investigation. Let the investigation happen. The authorities should look into it. Here's the reaction, the coverage from APTN News, First Nations media. So bring this up because their perspective is extremely important, especially with regard to this. Assembly of Treaty Chiefs in Alberta demand treason investigation to Premier Danielle Smith and the UCP. Story by Leanne Sanders. Just outlining what I told you. The chiefs say the RCMP has the role of protecting treaty rights and are asking them to step up now. I don't think that's inappropriate, especially when there's very clear influence, involvement of a foreign actor, the United States. Well, maybe not the government of the United States directly, sort of indirectly, kind of related. It's MAGA. Maybe the State Department, the Separatists going down for a meeting on that front, openly talking about maybe as much as $500 million in some sort of line of credit or financing to push the separatist movement in Alberta. I think it's entirely inappropriate. That is foreign interference. You see all the concerns, all the rhetoric, the alarm bells being sounded about Chinese foreign interference and foreign interference from other countries, but somehow the United States, and I'm not even blaming the U.S. government per se. I'm saying that this is a MAGA political U.S., but it is the government now because they're the ones in charge. They're the ones in power. It is foreign interference. It's blatant. It's obvious. They're talking about it openly. They're not even trying to hide it. So yeah, those people working with a foreign government to destabilize Canada and break it up. I don't know that it fits the legal definition under the Canadian Criminal Code. That's open for debate. But on an ethical, moral, and just pragmatic, from a pragmatic point of view, yeah, that is kind of what's happening. Breaking up a country would generally be viewed as kind of treasonous if you have, especially if you have some sort of involvement or backing from a foreign government, where they've even talked about outsourcing national security, bringing in that foreign government to provide a military. Do you see where it's all going? I don't like it. It's dangerous as hell. Says here in the APTN coverage, Smith maintains she and her party support a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. I get it. I understand the political nuance to it, but it is a bunch of doublespeak. But she says, she's been met with criticism for allowing legislation that made it easier for separatists and others to mount successful petitions on questions to be added on an October 19th referendum. That being said, it has been watered down, and now it isn't really a referendum on separation. It's a referendum on whether there should be a referendum on separation. That being said, it for a lot of people is taking us all too close for comfort to the possibility of Canada being split up, especially for the First Nations. And I think they have every right to demand an investigation at this point into what the heck is really going on out there in Alberta with these separatists. I smell something, and it don't smell good. That's just the way it is tonight. Naheed Nenshi, NDP leader, he's on the pro-Canada side. He also recently called for a CSIS investigation, not using the word treason, but does want a Canadian Security and Intelligence Service investigation into whether there has been foreign interference in the entire process. Let me see if I've got the right clip here. Here's his post. This was just recent. This was just days ago as well. The exact date on it, I'm not sure what the exact date. It'll be on here when I bring up the release that he put out. Here we go. Yeah, it was June 8th. So, yeah, just a little over a week ago. It says, I write to you as the leader of the official opposition in Alberta and a concerned Canadian citizen. As you know, Alberta is facing a separatist referendum. This was sent to Daniel Rogers, director of the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service. He says, the referendum will occur under the very real environment of foreign interference with the intended purpose of stoking separatist sentiment to harm social cohesion, foment polarization, and ultimately harm our country. In an interview on CBC's The House that aired on May 9th, 2026, you affirmed that the referendum is vulnerable to foreign interference. On May 6th, 2026, a number of expert groups and individuals published a report called Decision Making and National Unity Under Threat, Foreign Interference, Cognitive Sovereignty, and the Alberta referendum. The report demonstrates overt and covert foreign interference operations by at least two countries, Russia and the United States. The report finds that Russian-linked networks are using coordinated disinformation and amplification strategies to promote the separatist narrative. I've been pointing it out. Man, I've been talking about this for 2 years? Thanks for catching up. The U.S. engagement is more overt, using political narrative and influencer engagement. People thought I was crazy. No, just telling the truth. There's a price to be paid for that, by the way. These efforts exploit existing grievances, deepen divisions, and undermine the trust in Canada's democratic institutions, he writes, and decision-making threatening our sovereignty. Yep. This report comes on the heels of a report called Slopaganda, which was, it was valid, the whole thing valid. That I showed you all of that. They were really just, again, catching up. This was a report looking into social media, the way it's being used to manipulate our minds or the minds of people who are, involved in the whole separatist thing. Anyway, it's old news to me, but I brought it to you through this because they got traction with it, and finally people are paying attention. Slopaganda, the inauthentic YouTube network selling secession to Albertans, it was called, which identified multiple foreign YouTube accounts utilizing AI avatars and American voice actors to broadcast disinformation to Albertans. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more going on. All of these reports conducted their investigations before Alberta's largest ever data breach, where the private information of 3 million Albertan voters was made available to the Centurion Project, an Albertan initiative that should not have had access to this information. It's illegal. It is. On May 7th, 2026, news outlets reported that Elections Alberta had sent out 568 cease and desist letters, including to 23 people who had access to the entire electors list. Confidential data. The remaining individuals are believed to have accessed the list. With this incredible privacy violation, Albertans are at risk, especially to foreign interference. The threat to our national security is significant and requires action. Foreign interference has been going on longer than this. It's been going on for years. Amped up right now and finally being highlighted. It continues, in light of all these expert, urgent, and credible concerns, including your own warning, we call on the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service to, they just want an investigation. And it's appropriate, it's needed, it's overdue. And if they wait much longer, it might be too late. We'll see. See, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. All the stuff I was talking about 2-3 years ago, real. I didn't lie. All of it. All of it. Everything I reported. True. All of it. Oh, that pissed some people off. Oh.
Greetings, brave mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
You guys see this story about the foiled UFC plot? So this was apparently there was a plot, a terror plot against the Freedom 250 UFC event at the White House. So it was, of course, in honor of America's 250th anniversary and, of course, President Trump's 80th birthday bash. They put up an octagon and had blood sport match to honor the octogenarian. Anyway, very serious stuff. Apparently, there was a crazy plot to use drones and snipers and take out high-value targets, as they put it. Well, man, Kash Patel being criticized roundly by sources inside the FBI, Kash Patel, FBI director, right? NBC reporting, and I'm highlighting this because I believe this is their story. They're breaking it. FBI director's post on foiled UFC plot frustrates law enforcement, sources say. Kash Patel's post took some federal law enforcement officials by surprise, in part because authorities were still working to take suspects into custody, sources tell NBC News. Hang on a second here. Let me bring this down. This, again, for me, it highlights how inept Patel is. In this case, it appears to me he's putting politics ahead of the public interest and undermining the work, the investigation being conducted by his own staff, his own FBI investigators. Let's listen in to what NBC is saying about it.
House celebration, a UFC fight to mark the nation's 250th birthday, the alleged target for a disturbing, potentially deadly conspiracy. Foiled by federal agents who say they arrested 5 suspects in Ohio, Missouri, California, and Nebraska, but more remain at large.
It was an active plot, and it's ongoing.
Officials say the suspects coordinated on TikTok and various encrypted chats. Their twisted plan, officials say, would fly drones with explosives over the event to force the crowd to evacuate. And then snipers would fire as the high-value targets fled, including the president, billionaire guests, and a list of Republican lawmakers whom one suspect said took contributions from AIPAC, the American lobbying group that advocates for Israel.
It's a terrorist plot. That's not a few guys doing crazy stuff. That is a coordinated, planned terrorist plot.
19-year-old Tyson Proper of Ohio is among those arrested and charged with federal conspiracy and attempted murder. According to a criminal complaint, Proper's mother alerted police, concerned that her son quit his job and spent $3,000 of his graduation money to buy weapons and gear, including this rifle painted with an American flag.
Just a word to the wise. Don't do this kind of stuff. If it doesn't matter how pissed off you are at a politician, don't threaten them. Don't ever do anything like this. This is crazy stuff, and it will not end well for you. I guarantee it. And I know some people get pretty jacked up out there. Just saying, these people are nuts.
While posting anti-Semitic comments on Facebook. Another suspect, 32-year-old married father of 5 Daniel Eskridge of Missouri, posted a photo of his tactical gear and wrote, "When it's go time, I'll have to leave them behind in hopes I can return with a brighter future for them." The motivation? Tyson Proper told authorities this attack was designed to jumpstart a revolution in the United States.
Kelly joins us now. And Kelly, the search for suspects.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's going to jumpstart a revolution. Not. Yeah, you're going to be going to jail, man. But the problem is they were still, I guess, looking for suspects. The investigation was still ongoing, according to 2 law enforcement officials with knowledge of the case who spoke to NBC on condition of anonymity. Then FBI Director Kash Patel posted details of the arrests online Tuesday, claiming FBI credit for the investigation with a nod to law enforcement partners that helped. And then he says here, it took some federal law enforcement officials by surprise. That's right. When you work in law enforcement, most of the time, the less said, the better, because you can undermine investigations. It says took them by surprise, in part because authorities were still working to take suspects into custody in the sprawling investigation into more than 24 people on the encrypted chats, and according to 3 law enforcement officials. Some of the suspects in the alleged plot spoke of flying drones. We know all of that. He just, he's got no business having that job, in my humble opinion. Even local police services know better than to do such things. Patel's announcement has put the director in the spotlight again. Previously, it says here, Patel filed a $250 million lawsuit against The Atlantic over a story that focused on concerns about his drinking habits. You may recall that was just weeks ago. That lawsuit is ongoing. NBC News reported in February, it says here, not the only news outlet that did, that Trump himself had expressed disappointment with Patel's actions at the Olympics, where he was drinking on social media in a dressing room at the Olympics, when the director was featured on video drinking beer in the locker room of the men's hockey team after their gold medal victory. The FBI didn't dispute frustrations over the rollout, but instead issued a joint statement with the Secret Service that said there had been a collaborative law enforcement effort. So his first post at 6:50 a.m. Eastern Time included a screenshot of a Fox News story. He replied to that post 7 minutes later with a link to the story, which had scant details about the suspected plot. Besides Patel's own statement to the outlet, he also posted about it on Truth Social. Here it is here. Let me show you. Oh, that's social media. It'll get you into trouble pretty quick if you're in a position of public service and in the public spotlight, which the FBI director is. On June 10th, FBI, it says here on Patel's post, FBI, our law enforcement partners became aware of a potential threat to the UFC America 250 event in Washington, D.C., involving individuals outside of the national capital region. And thanks to the rapid action of this FBI, our partners, and the Department of Justice, in a multi-state operation, multiple individuals are now in custody, and allegedly planned attacks were stopped cold. While the result represented the best of investigative work, it was also nothing out of the ordinary for this law enforcement team. We are built to detect, respond to, and bring to justice those who threaten the lives of American citizens, particularly during large gatherings like the historic UFC 250 fight. That's exactly what we did here. I want to thank our great agents and partners. This work remains ongoing, and we will continue to update the public as permitted. Except by posting that, you let the cat out of the bag, and people inside the FBI are now so upset that they have spoken to the media to tell them that your actions are making their jobs more difficult. This guy should not have that job. That's my opinion, my editorial comment on this one. Don't worry, I'll have more when we come back.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, I'm back. Don't worry, I'm still here. All is well. I need to put my specs back on. I'm not blind anymore. I can see without them, but not as well. Okay, shall we continue? Where we left off. We need a new entry point here. Let's go back on the international front and talk about Ukraine, Zelensky. We're at a turning point there. As I said yesterday, Ukraine gaining ground. Russia on the back foot. Russia is in trouble. And as Ukraine is gaining ground, they're also gaining new support. In fact, this, I think, I don't know how much the MAGA crowd is acknowledging this, but President Trump seems to have shifted his position somewhat on this. There seems to be a united front now on the Ukraine issue with united support coming out of the G7. Zelensky was there, met with many of the leaders, including briefly Trump and also Mark Carney and others. Here's Macron talking about it. They put out a statement pledging unanimous support ongoing for Ukraine, talking about bolstering long-range capabilities so that Ukraine can continue its long-range strikes into Russia against infrastructure, oil refineries, oil storage facilities, bridges, and supply chain infrastructure and routes. They've been taking out trains, trucks, roads, and as I said, bridges.
The Americans took the initiative, and I'd like to commend them. They said that they would negotiate with Russia because they can do it. And I'd like to commend the American efforts to discuss with Russia. But what were the results of those efforts? What was the answer from Russia? Nothing. We, on the European side, we organized together in order to also try and discuss with Russia. What happened? Nothing. And then Zelensky also said, I'm ready to hold discussions with Russia, to negotiate with them. What did Putin say? No, I will not come. You need to surrender first. So President Trump, just like all of us, agreed that there was no serious willingness from Russia to hold peace discussions or negotiations. So I don't know if there'll be a before and after Evian. The facts will speak for themselves. But what I can say is that there was a during Evian. There was an Evian moment, especially when it comes to Ukraine. And what was this moment? It was a moment in which we all listened to President Zelensky's overview of the situation. We listened to him very seriously. We all agreed that Ukraine has resisted much better than some had feared, and that Russia was in a difficult position. And we all agreed that we will increase our support to Ukraine. We all stated that we will all increase pressure on Russia, and we all agreed to hold steadfast on this path. And that is a real change compared to all the months that came, the last few months. Not just from Europe, but from all the members of the G7 and all those who support Ukraine.
Big change, also change in strategy on the Russian side. You can see it. It's happened in the past, especially the past week. Russia going hard against Kyiv. The truth is, they're not just targeting military assets. They are targeting civilian targets, cultural institutions, cultural buildings, museums, even attacking that monastery, that historic church with drones, then claiming that they didn't do it, saying that it was a Patriot missile fired by Ukraine that took it out. I'll tell you, they're running out of Patriots. I don't know if they have many left. I know they don't. They were firing a few, but they don't have many, if any, left at this point anyway. That's why Zelensky has been speaking with President Trump, asked him during the G7 conference if Ukraine could have a license. Talked about licensing so that Ukraine can produce more Patriot missiles on Ukrainian soil. Trump saying they'll look at it. That looks like a real possibility. Also, Canada being praised of late for assisting Ukraine in its defense against Russian attacks. I noticed a post overnight. This was actually, it's not brand new, but I just mention it here because Canada has been helpful in ways that I think people maybe are not aware of. There was talk a few weeks ago about Russian attack coming in, and I believe it was Belgium and Canada that stepped up. Canada sending in Sidewinder missiles that it's actually old inventory from the Canadian stockpile for the CF-18s. Canada has been in the process of replacing these Sidewinders with a new version. So they sent as quickly as they could these older Sidewinders from the expiring inventory over to Ukraine because they had intelligence of impending attacks. The Sidewinders compatible with the F-16s being used by Ukraine, and they were used successfully to take down Russian cruise missiles that were targeting assets and targets in Kyiv. That was a few weeks ago, so potentially lives saved there. The munitions being provided for defensive purposes, that's what those Sidewinders have been used for. And that's largely as well what Ukraine has been using the F-16s for in that kind of a role in defensive positions. They don't push them out, as I understand it, into the front lines and into places of real jeopardy because they don't have a lot of F-16s. So they keep them back and use them to take out cruise missiles and other incoming missiles from Russia. Just a little sidebar there. As I say, not only gaining ground, but also gaining new support, not only from Trump, whose position, his attitude seems to be changing quite a bit, because I think he is cluing in that Putin's kind of backed into a corner. He needs to save face. He can't just quit for political reasons at this point. At least he thinks he can't. And so when Zelensky is saying Russia doesn't want peace, it's for a variety of reasons. And I think that it is very true. And it's also quite apparent because Zelensky also extended an offer to Putin to come to the G7 in a neutral location, or during the G7 in a neutral location, possibly Switzerland, to sit down to talk peace. And Putin rejected it out of hand. Didn't want to do it. But not only is the support coming from the White House itself, even social media influencers who are very tied into the White House, including Laura Loomer, doing a 180 on this Ukraine issue, previously very critical, saying, we don't want to be involved. That's been the bag position from the beginning and even before. But now she's saying that she has been, kind of duped. She says that she fell for Russian propaganda. She's now rejecting Putin's special military operation framing of the war. She's calling it a pretext for flattening cities. Now, all of this is, earning her praise from pro-Ukrainian voices. But some people are wondering about the sincerity of it all, especially given her past rhetoric on the issue. I've got a clip from her here where she explains why she is now looking at the whole Ukraine-Russia war in a different light.
You know, when I was deplatformed and when my election was rigged because the big tech social media companies wouldn't allow me to have access to social media, RT started reaching out to me and asking me to come on their show. And they said, why don't you have a byline on RT? And you can even write for RT. I never took any money from RT. I was never paid. But I felt, wow, how crazy is it that my own government won't allow me to, they're not fighting for me when the big tech social media companies are deplatforming my campaign and they're not allowing me to have a voice, but RT will let me talk about these issues, right? And then you start to get kind of goaded into saying things like, oh, well, maybe they care more about free speech than my own country. Or, wow, Putin made a comment about how they stole the election with mail-in ballot fraud. And so.
Are you listening to her? Yeah. True. Getting it?
You make comments that are pro-Putin. And I made a lot of those comments. I said, wow, he's 100% right about needing to denazify Ukraine. And I recognized that I said, wow, he's openly criticizing the big tech social media companies for rigging the election against Donald Trump. And you know, while I'm glad that he said those things, part of me wonders, like, did he actually mean it? Or is this part of the psychological operation to try to co-opt the right after 10 years of being told that there was Russia collusion and, you know, a Russian interference scandal in our elections. And then we all got Russia fatigue and we started to get really sick and tired of people who would constantly attack Russia for everything. And a lot of us just became overly sympathetic to Russia and we put the blinders on because we just thought that, oh my God, anytime anybody mentions Russia, well, this means that, you know, they're trying to spew propaganda against Donald Trump and the conservative movement. And they're calling us Russian bots. They called us all Russian bots, remember? And I remember even confronting Jack Dorsey during the Twitter hearing. And I said, you know, we are not Russian bots. We are conservative Americans. And you started to sympathize with the Russians because they would call people like me a Russian bot. They would say that we were not real people. We were part of a Russian bot campaign to support Donald Trump's 2016 campaign against Hillary Clinton. But now when I see them say things like we need to denazify Ukraine and we need to continue our brutal war with Ukraine while they pretend to be, you know, some Orthodox Christian country, but they're slaughtering thousands, like hundreds of thousands of young Christians in Ukraine. And then they're supporting actual neo-Nazis in the United States of America by clipping their podcasts. I'm like, wow, we fell for Russian propaganda and I fell for Russian propaganda. And so when Loomer Unleashed had this opportunity to send a correspondent abroad to Ukraine to be embedded on the front lines of the war and meet with Ukrainian officials, and there were multiple U.S. senators there at the Odessa Security Conference, and Andrew asked me whether I would approve a correspondent to go to Ukraine, I thought about it for a while and I was really hesitant to do so because I thought, what are people going to think of me? I've been so anti-Ukraine for so long, and I have parroted these talking points thinking that I was, you know, saying the right thing and not recognizing how, you know, as a conservative or as a Trump supporter or just as an American citizen, how I was being emotionally manipulated by propaganda online. And so I felt a little embarrassed, to be completely honest, sending a correspondent abroad because I thought, well, people are going to attack me and they're going to say that I'm a hypocrite and they're not going to be gracious and they're not going to give me an opportunity to change my opinion.
Everything I've been saying for years, it's true.
We are the Mavericks. Welcome to the Matrix, baby. Hope you like the view. We are the Mavericks. The world is watching. We are the Mavericks.
Canada, MAID, medical assistance in dying. Wow, that's a hot button issue. Tonight, a committee report, new, out of Ottawa, saying the government should indefinitely exclude people with mental illness from MAID. New development being picked up by mainstream media tonight. I'll highlight it here for you as well. I think this will surprise people who might be thinking that Ottawa is hell-bent on just proceeding with the whole MAID thing, but they are listening. Now this committee saying where mental illness alone is a factor, Ottawa should indefinitely, meaning like forever, exclude approvals for medical assistance in dying. CTV saying in this story, I'll read it, a parliamentary committee calling on the federal government to indefinitely exclude people with mental illness from becoming eligible for medical assistance in dying. Conservative and Liberal MPs on the committee co-signed that single recommendation in a report released today. People with a mental illness as their sole underlying condition are set to become eligible to apply for medical assistance in dying or MAID next March, but it is all under review. It is not approved. Now this committee advising against it. The committee, which was tasked with studying whether the country is ready for that to happen, held hearings throughout the spring. 4 of the senators on the committee wrote a dissenting report urging the government to disregard the recommendation and calling the committee's work flawed, biased, and lacking in rigor. Justice Minister Sean Fraser said earlier this week that he would take time to review the report and the testimony the committee heard before deciding how to respond. And so that's fair. He's going to look at all sides, consider everything, including this report saying, don't do it. Conservative members of Parliament discussing the report today on Parliament Hill, meeting with the media. I have the video. Let's go to it. I think the position on this will please many.
Today is a good day. Today, the Special Joint Committee on Medical Assistance in Dying tabled its report recommending that the Government of Canada amend the Criminal Code to indefinitely exclude persons whose sole underlying condition is a mental illness from eligibility for medical assistance in dying. Conservatives support the committee's recommendation that this expansion be paused indefinitely. This will save thousands of lives. And this is the position that Conservatives have taken from the beginning. In 2021, we voted against the Senate Amendment Bill C7 that created the sunset clause that set this dangerous expansion in motion. Since then, the Liberal government has been forced to delay the expansion twice through last-minute emergency legislation. The evidence is clear. It has always been. Moving forward with this expansion is reckless and dangerous. The 2 core problems remain unresolved. Clinicians cannot reliably determine when a mental illness is irremediable, and they cannot reliably distinguish a request for MAID from suicidality in this context. So that's why I introduced Bill C-218. This bill will amend the Criminal Code to permanently repeal the scheduled expansion of MAID where mental illness is the sole underlying medical condition. Time is of the essence. Bill C-218 has already begun the legislative process and is the clearest path forward to implement the committee's recommendation before the current sunset clause expires. This is a serious issue. And while we don't always agree, we were able to work collaboratively thus far with the government during the committee's study and listen carefully to the evidence before us. I hope that that spirit of collaboration continues. Vulnerable Canadians should not be caught in partisan games or legislative delay. There's no reason for government not to support Bill C-218 at second reading. Send it to committee and work with us to get this done as soon as possible. Now, some members have raised questions about the wording of the bill, specifically whether it should use mental disorder or mental illness. We understand that concern. The criminal code currently uses mental illness, while the term mental disorder has been used throughout much of the expert evidence and previous committee work. If the government wants the bill to use mental illness, we are happy to make that small amendment at committee. What matters is not using terminology or an easily resolvable technicality as an excuse to delay action. It would be an unfortunate display of cynical politics if the government introduced their own legislation that's coupled with other changes to the MAID regime. Over the course of the committee study, concerns were also raised about the effectiveness and enforceability of the current MAID safeguards. And that's why Conservatives are recommending stronger MAID monitoring and public reporting, minimal national standards for oversight, updated guidance and training, and a review of whether current MAID safeguards are protecting vulnerable Canadians. Canadians suffering from mental illness deserve care, protection, treatment, and hope. They shouldn't be offered MAID as a substitute for the supports governments have failed to provide. That's why our position is clear. The government must support Bill C-218 and indefinitely repeal this dangerous expansion. And now I'm going to let my colleague, Mr. Lawton, Mr. Cooper first.
Michael Cooper, Member of Parliament for St. Albert, Sturgeon River. The report tabled moments ago in the House of Commons and signed on to by all Conservative and Liberal MPs of the Special Joint Committee on MAID validates what Conservatives have said from day one, that this expansion of MAID for mental illness should never have gone forward in the first place, and that the only responsible course of action for the government to take in the face of their decision to have moved ahead with this is to put an indefinite pause on the expansion. This is also a lesson of what happens when a government puts ideology ahead of evidence and facts. After all, it is this Liberal government that signed on to and endorsed a radical 11th-hour Senate amendment to Bill C-7 that set this train in motion. Had the Liberal government followed the evidence, followed the facts, engaged in meaningful consultation, they would have heard what our committee heard overwhelmingly from experts, including leading psychiatrists, and that is that MAID for mental illness cannot go forward because it is not safe. It is not safe because of two fundamental clinical issues. First, it is difficult, if not impossible, to predict irremediability. What that means is that persons who could get better, who could go on to lead healthy and happy lives, would have their lives prematurely ended with this expansion. And secondly, that it is difficult to distinguish a rational request for MAID versus one motivated by suicidal ideation when mental illness is the underlying condition. And that is underscored by the fact that in about 90% of suicides, mental illness is a factor. This Liberal government, as a result of not following the evidence and jumping ahead with the radical Senate amendment, ramming it through Parliament, has resulted in the government having to bring in 2 emergency bills to delay implementation. This is the third kick at the can, so to speak, for the Liberal government. And the underlying clinical issues are not going away. They're there. And until they can be resolved, and there's no evidence that they will be resolved anytime soon, MAID for mental illness cannot proceed safely. And so in the face of that, the only course for the government to take is to follow the recommendation of the committee, introduce legislation to put an indefinite pause on this expansion, and in that regard, there's a very clear path, and it's called Bill C-218.
Andrew Lawton, Member of Parliament for Elgin, St. Thomas, London South. I am one of the millions of Canadians who has faced mental illness head-on and almost lost my life to a suicide attempt more than 15 years ago. And I and many others who wrote in, who've shared their stories, have said that if the expansion that is currently set to come in next year were there previously, I and these others might not be here today. This is a very important day that we had Liberal and Conservative members together endorsing one single recommendation, which was that this expansion should not proceed. And I cannot state clearly enough, and I cannot restate enough, that this will save lives. One thing that became abundantly clear in the testimony, especially from people who work with patients dealing with a range of mental illnesses, is that irremediability does not exist for mental illness to the extent that it does and in the same way that it does for physical illness. By that I mean psychiatrists have said that they have worked with patients that at one point in their lives felt they could never get better, could never heal, could never live a life in which they experienced joy and peace and comfort, who then do that. We had healthcare workers talk about patients that have tried to multiple times over end their lives only to come out the other end and be so grateful they didn't. Recovery is so crucially important. It's why Bill C-218 from my colleague Ms. Jansen was titled the Right to Recover Act. It's crucial that people who are at their most vulnerable stage in life dealing with these severe mental illnesses are given the supports they need to not want to end their lives anymore. And I'm proud to stand with those people. I'm proud to say to all of those people that we heard you. And this is the very important culmination of what has been a years-long discussion that I don't think ever needed to happen in the first place. But I'm glad we're here, and I hope the government takes the very clear and direct path forward, which is to support Bill C-218. Thank you.
Ms. Jansen, have you had any meetings or conversations with the Justice Minister, or have you scheduled any, I suppose, now, pending this report?
Well, what I'm really hoping is that they will actually take a look at my bill now super close, rather than start thinking about doing something on their own. I think ours is ready to go. As soon as we get back in September, we can actually move it forward, get it into committee, and make sure that we don't miss the sunset clause.
I don't know if the question from Mr. Cooper is only because it's something you said I want to reference. You talk about, I know that you guys framed the current Liberal government as the same as the previous Liberal government, but there seems to be a distinction here with this report at this time, and that you have Liberal MPs now saying, no, stop. And you have, the Justice Minister, different than the prior Justice Minister, how he speaks about MAID as an issue. Do you think there is a change with this government about how it's thinking about MAID?
I can say that we worked collaboratively with Liberal members on the committee who recognized, as we did, that there needs to be an indefinite pause. It is now in the Liberal government's court. It's in the Justice Minister's hands, it's in the Health Minister's hands, and the appropriate course of action is to move forward with legislation to put an indefinite pause. They have not committed to doing that to date. They need to do so, and I would just reiterate there is a clear path, which is Ms. Jansen's Bill C-218, to do just that.
If I could just ask one more about, you referenced, is actually from Ms. Jansen, you referenced, I think, in reading the Conservatives' report, the need for a review of the Track 2.
No, we're just saying that we heard a lot of testimony that there are challenges in the system as it stands, and so then we think it's really wise to review how things are actually working at this time.
What do you think is best placed for that review? Would it be a special committee like the one that was just struck? Would it be a separate Justice Committee, Health Committee? What do you think?
Yeah, we're just looking for the government to actually ensure that we do a study, because the review is very necessary based on the testimony that we heard there.
Where do Conservatives stand on dealing with Track 2? Because disability advocates have been very loud that the eligibility should be withdrawn back to maybe what it initially was.
I hope you don't mind me saying that today actually is just a moment of pure joy that we got this far as we have. We're going to take a little moment to enjoy that, to celebrate the fact that we were collaboratively able to come to this great day, and let's continue this kind of collaborative work on the MAID situation.
What is your message to senators who have a different view? Some of them wrote a dissenting report, and you also said, Mr. Cooper, that this stemmed from the Senate. So I just wonder what your reflections are on the Senate itself and its role in all of this.
One thing that's crucially important here is that all members of the committee from all parties, including senators, had the opportunity to and did invite witnesses to testify. So we heard from a large cross-section of witnesses. It was very significant to all of us that we not limit the number of submissions we could receive from people who were not even witnesses before the committee. And we received dozens of briefs. We heard from experts in the mental health space. We heard from MAID advocates. We heard from people who are skeptical of MAID, in particular the expansion to mental illness. And we heard from people with lived experience. And at the end of the day, if this did in fact originate from the Senate, there may be a couple of senators that want to just preserve their own legacy on this, but ultimately the message that we got from the committee's work was very clear, and that's reflected in the report.
And what do you think should be done for those people who are suffering from mental illness right now, who are hoping for this expansion to take effect next March?
We need to provide support and care. We need to provide people with the resources so they do not want to end their lives. And I'm so grateful that we have come to a conclusion that will not tell these people that we should be killing them, which is what would have happened. We're not giving up on them. We insist that everyone has a right to recover.
I have a question. Just on a slightly different note, do you plan to campaign for a united Canada in Alberta over the summer?
I support a stronger Alberta with a united Canada.
But are there any plans for any campaigns or any events?
I fully support the position taken by Pierre Poilievre.
Mr. Cooper, you were on the committee a couple years ago, the last time it had a look at this. And unless I'm misremembering it, I remember at that time the committee's recommendation was a delay. It didn't get to the indefinite part of the delay. So I'm wondering, what do you think has changed from that committee to this one to kind of get that wording of let's just not do this altogether?
Well, how many times can the government possibly introduce 11th hour legislation to delay when the issues are the same? They were the same in 2022 when the special committee convened. They were the same in 24, and they were the same over the course of this committee's mandate. And those issues are clear. They're fundamental clinical issues that will result in vulnerable persons who could get better, who could have their lives prematurely ended. We heard evidence that predicting irremediability is less accurate than 50% of the time getting it right. In other words, you'd be better off flipping a coin. To proceed with this would be completely reckless and it would be completely dangerous. It's the path this Liberal government set us on back in 2021. They have an opportunity to finally follow the evidence and do what we have called on the Liberals to do from day one, and that is to put an indefinite pause on this expansion.
Mr. Doherty, I actually wondered if we could just hear from you, because it's your advocacy that led to 988 as the mental health and suicide hotline, and I wonder what your perspective is on what happened today and whether you view there are enough resources right now for mental health, how you feel 988 might be a factor here and be helpful to people.
Well, first off, I want to congratulate my colleagues. I was slated as a member for the committee. I followed it along the way as I recovered from surgery, but I couldn't be more proud of my colleagues here. But all colleagues that were on that committee came up with the right decision. It's something that we pushed for since 2021, as you would know. And if you followed my career as being an elected official, I believe that you have to always give hope. And we have to knock down the barriers for those that are trying to get help. We have to break the stigma. We have to have these conversations so that people feel comfortable enough to come forward to say that they're hurting. My colleague, MP Lawton, just said that if this was offered when he was struggling, that he likely wouldn't be here. I've shared my own personal stories. I don't know whether I would be here. And we hear these stories time and time again. I think we should always be fighting for Canadians, always give them the best course of action so that they can recover, so that they can lead healthy lives. I don't think there's enough mental health dollars versus physical health dollars, it's pennies on the dollar. So we have to do more. Until we start seeing mental health in parity with physical health, we're going to continue down the path of seeing more and more Canadians that are struggling. Today is a great news story. It's a great story. We're giving those that are struggling with mental health the hope that they don't have to go down this path. We've heard stories about veterans that have called up seeking help for their mental health, only to be offered to or suggested, have you considered MAID? Absolutely horrible. That should be taken out of the equation at any time. So today is a great news story, and I'm here more in support of my colleagues, and I couldn't be more prouder for them.
I guess, Ms. Jensen, I'm remembering a version of a bill that former MP Ed Fast had put forward that I think was similar.
It's
the same. And it had at that time garnered some Liberal MPs voting with the Conservatives to get it to second reading. I'm curious, have you spoken to Liberal MPs about supporting your bill, and what do you think the level of support is within that Liberal caucus?
First of all, I want to say thank you very much to MP Ed Fast, good friend. I'm very thankful that he did push this forward and that he brought this issue forward nice and early so we could really start pushing on the issue. And of course, we've been out there talking to our Liberal colleagues, and as you can see, we've achieved a great thing today. So I'm very, very thankful. The work has really come full circle.
All right. That concludes that portion of the broadcast. I will be right back, and I'll bring you more on the other side.
We are the Mavericks. Welcome to the Matrix, baby. Hope you like the view. We are the Mavericks. The world is watching. We are the Mavericks.
It's officials, sort of, the Iran Peace Deal, which isn't really a peace deal. It's a memorandum of understanding extending the ceasefire that hasn't really been a ceasefire, but we'll see where it goes. And it's already on very fragile ground because tonight Israel still attacking targets in Lebanon, Hezbollah. However, it's official because being reported online, both in, I guess, Iran and the United States and the world, that the MOU has now been signed electronically. And there's the man who looks like he is exhausted. Looks like he is completely, totally exhausted. As he comes down the steps of Air Force One, this post obviously from Iran. But I guess they've signed this document electronically. He didn't look good, honestly, at the G7. He looked like he was about ready to pass out. Going to the UFC 250, staying up past his bedtime. And then flying over to the G7. Now flying over to the Versailles for dinner with Emmanuel. He's just got such an active social life. The MOU signed now electronically. However, the formal signing ceremony is still to come on Friday. Doesn't look like Trump is going. Instead, we're delegating that task to J.D. Vance. Why would he do that? I'll suggest to you that it's because I think it's a strategically advantageous politically for Trump to do that, because J.D. Vance has been playing both sides on this from the beginning, saying he supports President Trump, but he's skeptical of the war. He hasn't been fully supportive of the war from the beginning, and that's because he's trying to position himself. I'm editorializing, analysis from me. He's positioning himself for a presidential run in 2028. So he doesn't want to be bogged down with the baggage from this war, especially because it hasn't gone well, and it has the potential here of going south even further, of being becoming a huge political liability for anybody that supports it. He knows that. He knows that it's already likely a political liability as he eyes the president's job. But I think what Trump is doing here is to keep J.D. Vance kind of in his lane and in his place. He's delegated this task of signing that deal as a way to kind of dirty him up a little bit. It's a way for, this is my opinion, it's a way for him to push J.D. Vance into becoming fully supportive of what Trump has been doing with Iran. Not letting him kind of sit on the fence as the vice president and say, well, I support what he's doing, but I don't really support the war. No, now J.D. Vance is going to have his signature on that MOU. In that way, that will leave him politically vulnerable to his opponents, whoever they might end up being, whoever wants the Republican nomination for the next presidential election. You put your signature on that page on Friday, and now you own the war in many respects, about as much, almost as much as Trump does. So I think that's partly what it is, because Trump, I think, is eyeing a third run at the White House. Yeah, I don't think he's in a good position for it right now. If he were to try to do that, especially right now with his approval rating the way that it is, 30 percentile range, sometimes much lower, it's not looking good. And a third run at the White House is speculative, shaky at best. However, there is a movement afoot out there. I think Trump would like to do it, even though I don't think he's not looking good. Not sure that he'll make it to the end of this presidency, let alone to the end of this week, with the way he's looking. He's haggard, tired. He needs to get some shut-eye. Says he doesn't sleep much, but he needs some for sure. So that's what's going on there. We'll have more on that as the week progresses, and we will certainly be covering it on Friday to let you know if it really happens, if it really goes down. Now, I said earlier that I would comment more on the rape gang inquiry report out of the UK if you want me to. So I'll leave that to you. I'll look for the response in the chat. I don't know if there was any response earlier. Do you want me to share my analysis after speed reading it today? I absorbed, a fair amount of the information from it, 219 pages, so it was a bit of a challenge. I did speed read it, as I have been known to do. As a journalist, a reporter, you have to learn to do that. Doesn't mean I absorbed 100% of the information. I certainly didn't. It was a skim. I skimmed it. You think about that for a moment. I'll come back on the other side of this, and if you want me to, I'll comment. Otherwise, we'll move on to other stories, and we'll wrap up on the when I come back. But we've got a little bit of time left, so it's up to you. You are the program directors tonight.
They both look clean, but the guest list redacted, if you know what I mean. victims. And also Donald Trump. Coincidence? Just dumb luck. Right? Another sealed file. That crocodile smile. We did our best, says the DOJ, while the truth just fades away. Another news spin. No one will win except the rich guys with gold ID cards and closets full of secrets behind steel bars. Just a little glitch. A billionaire's privilege. That's the sound of the case. Closed.
Let's take a look in the chat. Is anybody even telling me what you want? Do you want me to talk about this rape gang inquiry report or not? I'm scrolling back up. But Lovely says, I think it's good to talk about this. Thank you, Dragon. Is that what you're talking about? I mean, I talked about it last night. I kind of covered it, but I said I would provide more tonight if you want it. But we went quite a while on it last night, so it's up to you. Dragon says, yes, do it. He says, anybody else? Anybody not want me to do this? Are you tired of me talking about it? It's possible that we have exhausted it, but I have a different take on it than I think you're hearing from anybody else. Sharon says yes. Okay, so we've got a few people saying, let's do it. All right. Here's my wider view on this whole thing. It's an uncomfortable subject to talk about, but here's the report again, 219 pages, the rape gang inquiry report. This one is from the Restore Party, which is kind of a spin-off from the Reform Party, both of them making immigration a centerpiece of their political platforms. There's a big by-election coming up. It's actually underway. Voting's underway right now in Makerfield. It's in Britain. And we will know the results of that, I believe, on Friday here in Canada. So we'll cover that as well, since we've been mentioning it. This report coming out just as people were about to go to the polls. The thing is, this report definitely has a place. But when I read it, like initially when I heard about it, and even as I kind of skimmed it yesterday, I had concerns about the whole thing on many levels, because it's being presented in a fashion where it appears to be some sort of a really legitimate thing with a lot of credibility behind it. But I immediately became skeptical of some of the information in it because of the numbers, especially this number of 250,000 victims. I'm not the only one who was concerned about it. Even some Reform members of Parliament also who have made immigration part of a foundational part of their political platform. They've been critical of the report as well, and I showed you an example of that last night. So 219 pages. It highlights the systematic grooming and rape of vulnerable girls, as they put it, overwhelmingly white British, often from working class backgrounds. The report claims that these gang rapes have been committed predominantly by Pakistani Muslim men. And the scale of this, 250,000 victims nationally, they say. 149 local authority areas, and they're saying that that's a conservative figure. It involves girls, they say in the report, as young as 11, who are groomed with gifts, alcohol, drugs, then gang raped, trafficked between towns, they say, blackmailed with recordings, and sometimes subjected to extreme violence, pregnancy, or even overseas trafficking. They're saying there have been institutional failures related to all of this. Culture and religious factors, they say, have been big factors as well. The report discusses clan-based honor-shame dynamics and interpretations of Islamic teachings as enablers. And they've come out with a series of recommendations, calling for stronger sentencing, better victim support, family-centered safeguarding, ending two-tier policing and accountability for enablers. And this whole thing spearheaded by Rupert Lowe, the leader of the Restore Party of Britain. And he's also mentioned pursuing private prosecutions and using parliamentary privilege in order to put information out there. Parliamentary privilege means that you can make statements that might otherwise get you in trouble legally for slander or libel. You can say things with legal immunity in the House of Commons, and they want parliamentary privilege to get on the House floor and share information that otherwise might get them sued for these reasons. Now, that being said, I have had concerns about all of this because of the methodology behind all of it. The methodology is not really fully sound by the standards of a rigorous independent statutory inquiry. Now, it has strengths. This report has a place, but it has weaknesses too. It's inherently limited and carries risks of bias, not just risks. It is a biased report. It's a political report. And the reason it's political because it has been commissioned by a political party, the Restore Party. But it has the veneer of some sort of an official legal proceeding, because it all began with an inquiry where they called witnesses over a 2-week period in a formal setting that resembles something of a court. This kind of procedure would normally be used for like not just an inquiry, but in Canada here, and I think in the US, in the UK as well, you would call it an inquest, a fact-finding mission. But if it's an official proceeding, and there is a separate investigation going on, ordered by the government, and it's taking place over about 3 years. This one, much quicker, commissioned by the Restore Britain Party or Restore UK Party, and then Restore Britain, and then paid for through crowdfunding. But they did not have the power to subpoena people, to compel witnesses to come forward. They didn't put witnesses under oath, and even if they had, the oath that they took would carry no weight because it is not actually a courtroom, so it's not a legal proceeding. They did, I guess these witnesses all signed a document basically pledging to be truthful and honest, but with no penalty for lying, it really doesn't carry any weight. They can put their name on the paper and sign it, and yet they're not compelled actually legally to tell the truth. And even if they lie and are caught doing it later, there's really no penalty. So it's not like being under oath and then committing an act of perjury in an official proceeding. So that might not seem like a big deal, but it actually is. Because it throws into question the integrity and the credibility of the entire process. Especially if you look at the way at an actual court proceeding or an inquest involving a judge, like an actual judge in an official proceeding, the way they're all handled is they have to be neutral. They compel witnesses to come forward and testify so that you get all sides of a story with real testimony and cross-examination to provide balance. But in this particular case, you're not getting that. In fact, the whole thing began with this inquiry, like not just a report. There was the 2-week inquiry where they did call witnesses and victims to testify and stakeholders and others, but with no subpoena powers. There were some people who just wouldn't testify. They wouldn't participate in it because it's not an official proceeding. It really what these things are, these kind of inquiries, is they become political tools. In a way, they're mock trials, often used not just here, but around the world for a variety of issues. There were certainly quite a few of them during the pandemic, during COVID, where they're like mock trials put together by political activists, sometimes by political parties, which is the case here, in order to give voice to people with grievances. But while they have the veneer or the veil or the look of an official court proceeding of some kind, they're not. They're really just a place where people can come and air their grievances and get traction. And there's some, you have the air or the illusion of authority behind it, because you have, in this case, members of parliament or officials from, not even officials, but politicians, a political party, some people who have had positions of privilege and power within society and government at one time or another. Sometimes they bring in people who are retired in order to give some air of credibility to it. But these are political at the core. And this particular inquiry has been political from the word go, from word one. This is how the inquiry itself, the inquiry that led to the writing of the report, began. And this is back in February with Rupert Lowe and his opening statement. This is how the whole thing began. First person up, first person to say anything at the inquiry, the person to open the whole thing up is not a judge. It's a politician, Rupert Lowe. And then listen to what he says.
Long overdue. Today we open the hearings. Today marks the beginning of something long overdue. Today we open the hearings of our independent rape gang inquiry. 2 full weeks of evidence, testimony and scrutiny. 2 weeks in which survivors will finally be heard. Back in March 2025, almost 1 year ago, I looked at the broken promises from politicians, and I thought that something had to finally be done. I wanted action, not words. So we launched a fundraiser which would go on to become the biggest political crowdfunder in British history. To everyone who donated, I want to personally thank you. Without your support, this would not be possible. I understand the depth of feeling on this issue, and I am humbled that you placed your faith in us. We will not let you down. This inquiry is about...
So he's not going to let you down. Just the issue here is that this inquiry is beginning with a conclusion or a verdict. An inquiry, an official inquiry, begins from a place of facts, complaint, but it becomes a fact-finding mission, and it starts from a place of neutrality. It doesn't start from a conclusion and then go and insert testimony that fits the narrative. Not to say, and I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying here, there's still a place for this because it does give voice, in some cases, to the voiceless. There's no question that there is a problem with rape gangs. No question. Other reports have dealt with it in the past. There has been finally acknowledgement of this long-standing problem. Finally, it's getting some attention, and this is helping to do that. But this is political. And while it's doing some good, it's also running the risk of causing some damage because of the way that he's doing it.
About action. We've gathered evidence. We will now listen, and we will then act. Private prosecutions are our ultimate aim. Justice is our ultimate aim. Justice for the girls who were abused. Justice for the families who were ignored. And justice for a country that was lied to repeatedly about what was happening in its towns and cities. We will identify targets for private prosecutions and pursue those individuals through the courts. We will not just talk, we will act. For decades, organized grooming and rape gangs operated in plain sight. Vulnerable girls, white working-class girls, were targeted, trafficked, raped, brutalized, and even killed. Many were children. Many were in care. Many had already been failed by the state before the abuse even began. We must be honest about who has been responsible. This was done primarily by gangs of savage Muslim men.
So again, he's reaching a conclusion here. You should not be saying things like that at the beginning of an inquiry. Not anything legitimate. He's already reached a conclusion. Before the inquiry has begun, no one has testified at this point. This is back in February, as the inquiry was about to begin. He's already giving you the conclusion. He's reading you the end of the book. And we haven't even begun the story yet. It's entirely inappropriate. Not uncommon in this kind of exercise because it isn't an official, unbiased, neutral finding of facts. He has the facts he wants because they support his political agenda, which is deportations, anti-immigration, and other things related to his political platform. This is a tool for him. And they're going to make sure that the facts fit their story.
This is a fact that we must face up to. And our inquiry is doing exactly that. In case after case, town after town, the same profile emerges. organised gangs of predominantly Pakistani Muslim men exploiting vulnerable girls, with authorities failing to act for fear of being accused of racism. The law must not bend for cultural sensitivities, and no community, no institution, and no public body is exempt from scrutiny when vulnerable children are being harmed. What makes this scandal even darker is how many people knew. Thousands and thousands knew and did nothing. Many remain in some of the highest positions of authority even today. Social workers raised alarms. Police officers raised concerns. Teachers, youth workers, and parents pleaded for action. All too often, those warnings were buried. Investigations were delayed. Victims were told they were making lifestyle choices.
This may be true. He's telling you that's the way it is, though. You haven't even had the testimony yet. And while it's always the case where lawyers, and before a trial or before an inquest or an inquiry, will gather all of the evidence that they want to present in court, they will do that, but in an actual bona fide legitimate inquiry, they don't start with the conclusion. They lay out their case. Both lawyers, or all lawyers, in the case of an inquest or inquiry, all the lawyers, all the stakeholders would come forward and lay out their information. Both the victims and the accused and other stakeholders, police, social workers, parents, people who've been affected by it in various ways, teachers. The problem with this kind of process is you're only going to get one set of facts, one set of stories and narratives. You're only, in this case, pretty much getting the victim testimonies and related information to that. You're not getting opposition politicians. You're not getting police. You're certainly not getting. They did not have any of the people accused of these crimes come forward compelled to testify in any way. So it's not a complete story. It's not a complete set of evidence. Not saying that what he's saying isn't true, but because you don't have a truly the method, the process here is not unbiased. And because it's politically charged, it taints the whole thing, including, unfortunately, the testimony potentially of the victims.
Offenders were left free to continue abusing, while the system protected itself for fear of undermining this sick, multicultural experiment that has been forced on Britain. This inquiry exists because the official response has been fragmented, defensive, incomplete, fearful, weak, and wholly inadequate. We're here to examine what happened.
This works for political purposes. It's highly inflammatory, very emotional. You push that button and you have the population divided. In addition to that, very muted response to this report, because if you say anything, including even what I'm saying, you run the risk of having people target you and saying, you don't care about the victims. So it's sort of like reverse political correctness in that way. He knows it. This is a powerful issue for him that he's using as political leverage.
Why it happened and who failed. We will not shy away from that, regardless of who may be offended. Most importantly, we will centre the voices that were pushed aside for far too long, the survivors. Over the next 2 weeks, this inquiry will hear evidence from survivors, from campaigners who refused to be silenced, and from experts, from whistleblowers, and from public figures who are willing to confront uncomfortable truths. We owe it to the victims to do this properly, and we are going to do this properly. The mental health and the well-being of survivors is at the heart of everything that we have done, with a team of 5 qualified support specialists on hand to help the survivors through the process. I want to place on public record my thanks to the entire inquiry team. I understand how much effort has gone into getting us this far, and it is sincerely appreciated. We owe it to this country to say clearly and without fear, no ideology, no institution, no cultural excuse, no religion will ever again be allowed to stand in the way of justice. That is why we are here, and that is why these hearings matter. And that is why this inquiry will not look the other way, as has happened for so very long, by so very many. Thank you.
Mark?
Again, don't get me wrong. There's a place for this. But you have to understand that what you're looking at here is a political exercise. This is political theater. It's a mock trial, not a real trial. It's not a real inquest. It's not an official inquiry. That is taking place. And the scope of that is broader. They do have subpoena powers. They can compel all stakeholders to come forward and provide testimony. It's going to take longer. It is taking longer. That inquiry is laid out to take place over the course of 3 years. Critics say that's taking too long. That may actually well be the case, as this investigation on the government side is taking place. This one happening much faster. But the reason it's happening faster is because they do not have many sides of the story testifying. They do not have the need then to dig into it in as much depth. It has been an exercise in giving victims a voice, which is fine, and that's why it has a place. But it's also political, and they're rushing it through and putting the report out at a very opportune time, just the day before voting began in that by-election in Makersfield, which is ongoing right now. The timing, I'm certain, no coincidence. 219 pages. In addition to that, the inquiry itself not open to the public. No video record of it available to the public. This inquiry, they're saying for security and privacy reasons. I do largely understand that. Even so, in an actual official inquiry, the room would be open to some level of the public. And there's no, that's kind of the minor side of this. The other issue surrounding all of this is the methodology used in compiling the statistics. Right off the top, this claim of 250,000 victims, to me, it's highly suspect. I don't even, it's the number so large that it defies belief. The reason I say that is that 250,000, you just start breaking the numbers down, and the way that they're characterizing this, where did the 250,000 come from? They're saying that's a minimum, probably way more. And yet, how could that be? Well, they're saying this is over a century. But even those arguments don't hold up. The 250,000 number stems from a comment that was made some years ago on the House of Commons floor. There were some other reports as well identifying some numbers, but that is not a hard statistic. That's an extrapolation, 250,000. That's like a wild estimate that they've come up with. And the timing and the framing, and there's no transparency on how they've come up with these statistics. The actual calculations, the methodology behind it, I couldn't find it in the report. So they're not really explaining, in detail how they came up with the 250,000 number, other than to say there was a comment identified from a previous presentation in the House of Commons, and there were some other reports, but none of those reports cite a number as big as 250. They're identifying like 1,000 or 1,400 victims over here in this one geographic region. Then they take that and they're breaking it out and making an assumption that this is happening across the entire country in all communities, and they're multiplying and calculating without actual bona fide verification of any of that actually happening, until they get to this huge number of 250,000 victims, saying it stretches back a century. But then also in the report, they go on and say that this really, the first documented case wasn't until like the early 1950s of a rape gang, a gang rape rather, in this fashion, which already kind of cuts about 30 years or so off their century-long extrapolation. So now your number becomes more and more condensed. Then if you read further, they really say that the problem really began around 1997, when the Blair government opened the borders and brought in or initiated mass immigration. So now what we're looking at is the bulk of this happening between 1997 and today. Now you start to see, okay, 250,000 victims over that period of time. That's all now more condensed from 97 to 2026. And it keeps on narrowing down more and more and more. That's a lot. Like, that's huge. To the point where it's like, how many per year are we talking about? How is that possible? And then it's like, you start to break the numbers down. That's supposed to be for gang rapes. I could buy the number if you want to talk about sexual abuse in general, if you want to talk about trafficking of people for the purpose of prostitution, all kinds of other sex crimes. You want to start talking about sexual abuse in broader terms. But this is a report specifically dealing with gang rapes. To suggest that you've had 250,000 gang rapes from 1997 to today, personally, I don't live in Britain, but that number seems incomprehensible to me. Because on top of that, then you have all of the other sexual abuse cases. You're at the point where I know that the stats suggest that you have about 1 in 20, 1 in 15, maybe 1 in 10 young people, especially women, who have been sexually abused at some point in their lives. The 50% of that happens within families. As I said last night, uncles or siblings or abusive parents. And those kinds of abuses range in how serious they are and the different forms of abuse that take place. So you kind of take that stuff out of the equation. You're left, just gang rapes, 250. That's 250,000 people from 1997 to this. I'm struggling with that. This is a number that has come under attack. I'm not attacking it. I'm saying I'm skeptical. I don't think the methodology on the math is good. I think it's flawed. I don't think that's a real number. It's just a number they've made up using previous studies and extrapolating, estimating. And if it happened over here, and if it happened over there, and if it happened over, there's no proof of it. These then become imaginary things that they cook up to make the number bigger, to make the story bigger, to get people even more upset and jacked up. Because that's a lot of what's going on here. It's political. This is designed to get people angry, get people afraid. The problem is, it is a real problem. And if you want to get to a real solution, you need real information, real stats. This is something that's been done here in Canada too, on this very kind of issue, especially abducted children, where numbers are taken completely out of context. They twist the numbers, even the MAID issue. People opposed to MAID. I called it out on an interview that we did here a couple of months ago. The methodology, completely flawed, where they lump a bunch of stuff in together, categorize it all as one thing, and it's not, you get this huge number that isn't really representative of a fact. This is a fabrication, that 250,000 number. I say prove it. Not that it needs to be proven. There is documented evidence. It is proven that there's a problem. The scale of it, though, is what's in question. And the problem here is that when you have a politically charged report, a politically charged and a predicated inquiry that is obviously biased, drives toward a political agenda, and then you're using these numbers that are open to attack. Here I am, basically a mathematical layman, laying out an argument that just, honestly, it obliterates that number, shows that it doesn't have real credibility behind it at all. And if I can sit here and do that, people who are more learned than I can rip that report apart. That's a problem. That does a disservice to the actual victims, because now you have victims who have been offered an opportunity to testify as part of this process, which is not really legitimate in the sense that the methodology is flawed. The process is biased. The process is flawed. The process is political. And now you have victims who are participating in this political process, who I have no doubt that these people who have come forward, most of them, if not all of them, telling the truth, telling their stories. But now they're part of a political process when they need to be part of a process of justice. That's not to say that there isn't a place for this. There is. The stories need to be told. But to put this forward as some sort of a quasi legal proceeding is risky and dangerous, because it taints the evidence. It taints the witnesses. He's already made an assertion here, or he's talked here, Rupert Lowe has said that they're going to pursue private prosecutions, if not, broader prosecutions. They will no doubt be putting pressure on government to pursue prosecutions against people who are accused. And rightly so, as the evidence dictates. But the problem is that the victims, many of them, may be entitled to and likely will pursue at some point compensation for the pain, the suffering, the horrific things that they've been through. Where will who will they seek compensation from? My guess is, and this is based on a long history of the way the law works, they won't just go after the involved in the actual gang rapes. And there's no question that the scale, who is actually responsible, who's guilty, who victims involved in a political process, it taints their story. When they go for it, because the testimony they're giving here by the political process, it may be potentially here could be questioned, knowledge that they may be pursuing compensation financially from government and being saying things. All of that can be called up as evidence later in court. To be careful what you say. And you have to be careful about what process you get involved with. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Exploiting this for political purposes. He's used, maybe righteous. He may have the best of intention. No matter how you frame it, it is political. The inquiry is theater. It has been political theater from word one. The witnesses then can become very tainted is because the process is not, the report is flawed. The data in the report it appears to be exaggerated. Therefore, the report, it has giant, large, huge, gaping holes in it, which that can and may be used in the future against the witnesses. He may be actually doing a disservice to the victim. Get it? That's member of Parliament from the Reform Party. I phoned him, but I called up his social media post stating it, but it wasn't. This is what he was talking about. The process can put the reason it can undermine things is if you're going to do got this right. Because the methodology, especially on those stats, right up. But the first documented case, not till 1952 or 53. And then, but the real just becoming, now you're compressing all of those numbers. Actually, it's not just over transparency on it. They're all over the map on these stats. But people are afraid to talk about it. People are afraid to tell. Don't get me wrong. There's no question. There is a problem. That's documented. What has it been? How bad is the problem still right today? Not just lie about it. Lying, especially in a case, especially about a matter as serious as this, especially about anything, whether it's or any serious matter like this, it justify the means. Is vital. An exaggeration, and even in the court of public opinion, it with that gets dirtied up. The recommendations. Down in my notes. What were the recommendations? This is, I could believe the numbers. If we were looking at like all forms of sexual abuse, but we are talking about gang. To suggest that a minimum of 250,000 actual gang rapes happened at the right off the top may be true, and there is evidence, real evidence. There is a trend happening there. World. It's basically a political paper. This is a political report, from the public, from you, looking for your support to start racially. That's not to say, okay, that they're. The problem in our society today is that no question that we have a case swung way over here for a while where people have become afraid and have been police, social workers, others to through their political correctness, in their fear of being called racist. It's true. Legitimate patterns. The report calls to racially profile people. I believe absolutely that Rupert Lowe wants to do that. From mandatory recording and publication of and immigration status for perpetrators and the victims in these child exploitations. Calls for stronger intelligence-led policing targeting cornerstone of all this, of foreign national offenders and those in subcultures. See, now they're expanding it out already in the recommendations. It's not targeting what they're calling enablers. That's dangerous. You go after the people who perpetrate the crimes. You go after the criminal. They want to deport the criminals, everybody around the criminals, and then everybody around them. There's not really a full definition of it that I could find anyway. They want the pendulum to swing way back to the other side from ignoring past, saying, let's just get rid of all these people. Now, that's a pretty broad statement from me. They're already going from trying to hold the criminals, the rapists, justice against them, putting them in jail, or everybody that enables them. Again, they want racial profiling. See, the is committed. If it's a white man in his 30s, black jacket and sunglasses, you say that it's a white man. It's, 3 brown men, it's 3 brown men. And when you arrive at the scene of a crime, you try to, in my view, you come in with an open mind, prejudice, prejudging. You treat everybody merge. If you're aware, like if you know that bunch of selling drugs and the bike gang responsible for previous crime, yellow stripes on them, right? And they all have tattoos that say up, and you've got a complaint about somebody selling drugs, and you see a guy in a black mother. That's a pattern. That's legitimate. And if people, then if the guy's green, that would fit the pattern. A legitimate thing. To ignore the fact that he's green is not. It's too far over that way, where it was like, if the guy's green, just don't do anything, because you'll be accused of swing it back the other way too far. Then you get back to where we've been at times in the past, racially. And in fact, I'm sorry to tell you, investigation commenced. Police officers charged, accused just for being black. For instance, there's evidence, it has to go to court, has to be one person's dreadlocks. These officers suspended now. It's going to court. 26. There is a problem with racism. There is, too much political correctness. No question about it. That gets people jacked up is not the answer. In the streets during the big protests where Tommy Robinson was at the vandalism, the destruction, we saw buildings being set on fire. People upset about the immigration issue going from door to door, home to home. Family, not white, being targeted by the gangs. They got burned out of their house. Those people didn't do anything. It's a social problem. It goes, the immigration issue is front and center. Not just what you do, it's how you do it. The methodology flawed here, the process flawed. But it's okay to read it. It's okay for the needs to be framed properly. People need to understand what it is they're actually looking at. Official or a legitimate legal proceeding of any kind. It's just political. That's what this is. Be given voice, but I'm critical of what Rupert Lowe has done here because he has, I think, has been and a desire for, I would say, revenge. And a desire to acquire power. These are the core recommendations. Mandatory recording and publication of for offenders and ideally victims. Harsher sentencing. Fair. Cornerstone of their whole, that's the whole reason for the existence. They don't like. Automatic removal of enablers. I'm reading it. Broader action against institutional and sanctions, including loss of pensions for officials, police, social workers, victims due to political correctness or fear of racism accusations. They're going to go after their political opponents. They're going to use this as a political tool to purge the government of too progressive, too liberal. Based on this, for complicity. But no, it'll go beyond that because of the way this is all being written. They're going to go after anybody they don't like. They'll multi-agency coordination and specialist training, SE units, and training that explicitly addresses ethno-religious patterns. You guys also want to establish an ethno-state. Pendulum swinging back too far the other way. In child protection, although we know that families themselves trauma care, removal of barriers to compensation. These victims will be going after compensation. Rightly so. But be careful what you say. And review of criminal records for victims who were prosecuted. Example for prostitution-related offenses. So if you have women who are out there working as prostitutes, see, they're going to shift the blame. Yeah. Each case can be a long process, but every case should be handled on, its own basis. Legislative changes, new laws targeting group-based CSE specifically, closing gaps in existing frameworks and stronger powers for private prosecutions where the state fails. Opening the floodgates for litigation. Fair enough if it's warranted, but better get it right. Otherwise, innocent people will be caught up in the chaos, the fury, the anger, the revenge. And broader systemic reforms addressing root causes such as immigration policy, which is what that whole party is about, integration failures, and cultural religious factors. Be references to clan dynamics and Islamic teachings in the report's analysis. Yeah, I see. Using parliamentary privilege to name individuals, releasing more testimonies, and pushing for full implementation. They want to get into parliament and then target people that they've got an issue with. And it may be because they are guilty of sex crimes, gang rapes, but you start using parliamentary privilege to pursue criminal cases, that means they can go on the House floor. They could name you, accuse you of anything they want, accuse you of sex crimes, crimes you have never committed. And there wouldn't be a thing you could do about it. They could smear your name, drag you through the mud, destroy your life, and they could never be held accountable because they have parliamentary privilege, allowing them to say anything they want with no fear of a penalty for slander. Careful what you ask for. Be very careful what you ask for. You give the power to these guys, I bet you they use it. Because they're led by a politician. Who's not after just revenge. She wants power. I'll see you guys back here tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern. On the flip side.
I heard old Cosmo howling last night up on the hill where the moon shines so bright. He was singing a tune, lonesome dogs cry about freedom and running and touching the sky. If I leave here tomorrow, won't you still remember me? Cosmo's free, running wild, wild as a wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. Cosmo's got them paws that just itch to roam. He's chasing his dreams, he's far from home. With a heart full of love and a spirit so free, he's living his life wild and carefree. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? Cosmo's free, running wild, wild as a wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. He's got the stars in his eyes, the wind in his fur, a tail that wags like it's never heard of a blur. Cosmo's on a journey, he's got no chains. He's running through fields, breaking all the lanes. Now the night's getting cold and the sky's turning gray. But Cosmo's still out there, he's miles away. He's not looking back, he's got his path to tread. With every step, he's leaving his bed. If I leave here tomorrow, won't you still remember me? Cosmo's free, running wild, wild as a wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. So if you're feeling lost, just think of Cosmo's run. Remember his spirit, his freedom, his fun. And maybe one day, when you're feeling alone, you'll find your own freedom and let your spirit go. If I leave here tomorrow, won't you still remember me? Cosmo's free, running wild, wild as a wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. He's got the stars in his eyes, the wind in his fur, a tail that wags like it's never heard of a bird. A heart full of love and a spirit so free. He's living his life wild and carefree. He's got the stars in his eyes, the wind in his fur, a tail that wags like it's never heard a bird. Cosmo's on a journey, he's got no chains. He's running through fields, breaking all the lanes.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.